He has given you gifts that you cannot do with other people. And
Oh,
one of my favorite things to do is to find those gifts and find those skills in the individual, because I really do believe that the Lord creates us intricately and different and unique. And that's not a bad thing. And so by affirming this individual in their skills and their talents, and what I mean by that is encouraging her to jump in and audition for a production that I would think eventually changed their life.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Jaclyn Witt.
welcome to the members-only portion of the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. My name is Jaclyn, and today we've got Aaron Davis with us. And I want to learn more about Aletheia Legacy. And actually, I want to hear a testimony, because we talked in the first part of the interview how, what you do and how amazing it is. And so I want to hear, how does that actually affect the students who have accessed your program?
First of all, once again, thank you so much, Jaclyn, for having me. Happy to be here, and I love talking about this stuff. So talking to like-minded creative individuals is something I'm always happy and pleased to do. So I would say, a testimony in the previous podcast, I talked a little bit about my story and how I had a sense of loneliness. I was discipled, but I didn't have any like-minded individuals that I could share, my thoughts or hold me accountable as I pursued my creative endeavors. And so when we started building, art programs and creating opportunities, there's two students, same class, that stuck out with me the most. And one of them, they told me later in life that before we came in and built up a program and created a safe space for them to express themselves and to get into the arts, they felt like they were just so misplaced, and they just didn't have any, they struggled with identity, and they struggled with where to go next. And they revealed to me later that they were struggling with, suicide. And until they found a safe place to be comfortable in their own skin and be affirmed, and not in a way that I would say that the world affirms and you're just special just because you are who you are, but we are special because we are made in the image of God. He has given you gifts that you cannot do with other people. And one of my favorite things to do is to find those gifts and find those skills in the individual, because I really do believe that the Lord creates us intricately and different and unique. And that's not a bad thing. And so by affirming this individual in their skills and their talents, and what I mean by that is encouraging her to jump in and audition for a production that I would think eventually changed their life, I think was very powerful. And likewise, there was another individual, he would have never said this to me, but his mother had a conversation with me, and after he graduated, and she pulled me aside and said, I need to thank you. I need to thank you for opening up this door, because we didn't have a place for our son, and you've given him a place where he has a voice. And I think that's really important for it. I'm more of an extroverted kind of guy, but I'm the extrovert who likes to find and adopt the introverts and, take them.
Probably doesn't seem like it. I'm always in situations where I'm the extrovert, but I'm very much an introvert in my day-to-day life. I mean, you give me a mic and stick me on a stage and I'll go for it. But I mean, at home in my day-to-day, most of the time I'm just very private. I get overwhelmed when I'm around too many people, but at the same time, I need people like you to pull me out of the house to say, let's go do something, or let's go to an event, or even just go for a walk. I could so easily just stay within my four walls and just live in my own little space. But that's what introverts, we need people like you that seek us out and say, hey, there's something special there. Let's pursue that.
Yes. And I that's a big part of, I think, what we do. And if I have to give myself any credit for a skill set, is I think I've done decent at that over the years, is I found quiet, maybe shy individuals who saw a little bit of talent there, saw some skill. We need to pull that out. And through, coaching and encouragement, my goal is to create that pathway for them to have their voice, to be able to speak. And the goal is that they, by being loved on and equipped and trained, not only in their artistry and their skill, but also within the word, the goal is to creative discipleship. And we want them to go out there and do the same. So there's so many faces that come into mind when I think of testimonies. I think the young lady who, I think my first theater program that I started with, he was so new at all of this, and so was I. I think that I talked a bigger game than I could really bring at that point. And we were both just rookies, and she was a shy, quiet introvert. And, we utilized each other for the next few years, where I gave her a platform to build her artistry. And then for her, she allowed me to work with people who just wanted to learn and just be a canvas and say, all right, what are we going to do next? And to this day, she's still into creative art. She's more on the literary side now, and I love keeping up with her. And so those stories, those are just a few stories, and I'm approaching them with 1,000 feet up in the air. They get me up every morning. It's those stories and all the many other stories like those individuals that make me think, okay, we got to be very intentional and missional. We say creative discipleship a lot, but I think that there's a level of creative evangelism. And I don't mean just fun ways of sharing the gospel. I mean going out and finding those creatives and finding them and bringing them onto the team, because they're most likely out there. They're out there, they're hidden. They might feel like they don't have a place. And so if we can find them and bring them onto the team, strengthen them, I would love to see the fruits of that labor,
Yeah. Yeah, even for myself, I actually said I had a closet hobby for years because I started writing scripts when I was 11. And, other than my parents, I didn't really share it with anyone. And so it was my closet hobby for over 20 years. That's crazy. And then when I took it to the pastor, and he kind of shut it down and said, no, don't do that. But it was something that was in me to do. It wasn't something that I just had an idea and did it one time for fun. It was something I did, nobody had to pay me for it. I didn't do it because I got any recognition for it. I got no attention for it. It was just in me to do. And so that's the thing with creative people. And I even have stories of students that I've worked with that have had their closet creative hobby. Sometimes you don't even know what kids are up to. For example, I think we sometimes forget that when we were kids, we thought we knew who we were, but we were still learning that from day to day. We were still learning and discovering who we were, but we didn't know that. We thought we knew who we were at the time, but we were basically just taking in all of the voices around us. And so as adults now, when we can recognize a youth and see that there's something there, some kind of a spark or something, and we can help them to discover that about them in a way to understand that this is part of this is how God made them. This is a gift that God has given them. This is part of how they can connect with God in this unique way, and to help them to really enjoy it and love it. And one of the things that I've done, because I've been a teacher I taught performing arts, dance and music, piano, stuff like that for a while. And what I felt like my goal was with teaching beginners or, the emerging artists was to help them find the joy in it. It's not about all of the technicalities. Yes, we'll get there. Absolutely, we'll get there. Yes, this is how you need to hold your hand. Yes, this is how you play the scale properly and whatever. But I wanted them to find the joy, because the joy is what really drives people to continue and to persevere when things get difficult. When you can really find joy in something. For me, for writing and script writing, it brought me joy. I didn't need the attention from it. And I know extroverts, okay, sure. Yes, they love the attention. And when I was a kid, people would definitely call me an extrovert. I remember my parents telling me, you are not the only one in the room. But there was something there. And I'm thankful that my parents recognized it and they allowed me opportunities to pursue it. But with what you're doing with Aletheia in the different churches and schools and stuff, when as adults, even if you're not a creative adult, just recognizing that if you can help someone who is creative to foster that in a way that honors God, there is nothing like creativity to really give you this sense of being in a way. It's really hard sometimes for artists to not place their identity in their art, because it is something that it comes from so deep down. And so there is the importance to recognize you are not the art, you are the creator of the art, and you do that because of who created you. And that's where your identity is. But because art is something that is so personal, to deny it, I think it does such a disservice to children, or to ignore it, or to miss it. If we can recognize it and draw it out, let children have the opportunity to really grow in that and to have that as a way that strengthens their relationship with God.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're kind of at that point now, not necessarily just with Aletheia, but between when I even first started this, getting into all of this, is we have been able to raise up the next generation of teachers. Some of my former students, some success stories is they're now leading up groups. They're either directing a performance or teaching an art class or leading up our summer art camps. And so it's been really cool to be able to see now that I've been able to pass the baton and kind of become a little bit more of the visionary for what we're wanting on a larger scale. But that was the whole goal, was that I did not want our young creatives to go out there and just be squashed by the world. So whether it's creating opportunities for them to get into film, into theater, visual art, music, we've catapulted some into being able to put their stuff out there on Spotify and Apple Music and whatnot. And we've provided those resources
Nice.
and we've been creating a family slowly but surely. And it's been really cool to see that because, at the end of the day, we're doing this for the Christian creative community at large, but also I'm trying to create something for even my family. I have 3 little ones at home. My kids, I got 2 boys, Abel and Ollie, 7 and 5, and then my youngest is my baby girl, Eden, who is 4 years old, and they love this stuff. I mean, they eat it up, and they're between 7 and 4, and they already know more actors and directors and artists and musicians than I did, I think, most of my life. And so being able to put them into this world, they're a big part of that as well. And we would say what we do and what we've created is kind of like our family farm, is that this is a group effort. I might be leading it, as a spearhead, but I'm held up by my loved ones here at home.
So what are some ways that you include discipleship in this process? Because we've talked about starting programs for like the creative side of things. So how do you also include the discipleship side of things?
Yeah. So one, we are growing on our virtual platform side of things. So whether it's Zoom, Discord, opportunities to bring creatives on a national or international level together. But also I would tell, let's say you are a head of school or a pastor who says, hey, let's talk about this. What should we do? I would say community needs to be built, and it needs to be built locally and then nationally or a wider scope. So with that, let's use Christian worldview as an example, is we got the chance to bring 3 individuals within our program to come on as interns, and they got to serve and work within the larger community of Christian filmmakers at Christian Worldview. They would not have had that opportunity if we did not get to sponsor them, and Christian Worldview also sponsored them to get to attend to that. They've never met movie directors and actors before, but bringing them on board, one is an aspiring animator, one wants to be an actor, the other just loves all things creativity and technology. And so giving them that exposure to the greater Christian film community was huge for them. But also, likewise, is we have to have those opportunities in community on a smaller scale locally, whether that is, for us, we would say that we meet with the leaders. Some we have as ambassadors where I meet with them weekly, I pour into them, and the goal is to have that ambassador next to me leading the next group. And so that is, we typically pluck a handful of other leaders, and a leader is someone basically who is really serious about this and aspiring, maybe they would say this is a career opportunity, or maybe this is just getting them through their days and they love it. It's an outlet for them. And so we pour into them, and we, a regular discipleship, almost like a Bible study, and where we're getting into the word, but we also, where are we at? How are we feeling? We had a virtual online gathering last night, actually, and one of the questions, and everyone laughed at this, is I said, this sounds like they're 2 different questions, but I'm sure that they're the same, is I said, what projects do you have coming up? And then go ahead and tell me what stresses are taking over your mind right now. And we all understand that, because especially those who are project-based, is those are our stresses. Never goes the way that you always want it to. It's never that clear, easy, simple paved path. You're always having to come up with new solutions. And
yes,
and I acknowledge that even myself is sometimes I don't want to get into community because I have all these other things in the back of my mind. And so let's not escape that. Let's go ahead and just bring it to the circle and acknowledge that we all have our stresses. And maybe by acknowledging that we each have our stresses, and maybe it's different. A music producer can say that he has stress because he's dealing with a legal issue, whereas the filmmaker might be stressed because his SD card is wiped, or, his files have been deleted. But we can both talk about those issues and how are we going to overcome them. And I think that we can find the same path and even use a biblical foundation to overcome that with community. And so I would say, I think it needs to be both. And there needs to be a greater community at large that's a part of making disciples. And then there's also needs to be the local, which is what I think also church should be. Is you got the church, the universal church, but then also you have your local church and maybe your local small groups.
Yeah. And, you're so right with the community. I had a meeting last week with a guy that we're in the process of helping some people start production for their film. And so we're kind of mentoring them because they're new at it. But the thing is, I hadn't spoken with this guy in probably a few months because the project got shelved for a bit. Now we're back on. And so I contacted him so that we could talk about how we wanted to proceed or whatever. But he had been exhausted with some things and he was kind of down. And by the end of the conversation, he was like, this was no accident. I really needed this conversation. I am feeling encouraged in the Lord.
Content Christian Media Conference is happening soon. Join hundreds of filmmakers, actors, screenwriters, podcasters, and authors for this 5-day, 5-star event. Come expectant and leave equipped as a content creator for the kingdom of God. September 23rd to 27th at Capernaum Studios in Poolville, Texas. Register today at ChristianMediaConference.com. Save $50 off your full registration with the discount code 50FAFF.
And so that's what we can do for each other too. Obviously, yes, we all have these stressors because we have projects. But when we come together and we realize welcome to the club. This is how it works. This is the process. And we can pray for each other. We can lift each other up, encourage each other. And by the end of it, it doesn't feel so heavy.
Yeah.
So I love what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, if I may give this story, because I feel like I'm talking a lot about what I've given, but man, I'll just use this past week. Beyond this previous week, I would say most days, almost every day over the last couple of months have been a fairly optimistic day. And then this past week, every other day, it was just something new. And then I'd get over it the next day and I was like, had my chin up and I'm moving forward. Wednesday, we had a financial burden. Like I said, everyone has different struggles, but most of us can relate. And so it's like, oh my goodness, how are we going to be able to move forward with this financial burden that we have put in front of us? And it was super discouraging. And then we saw that there was an opportunity that arose out of a meeting, a random lunch meeting that I had with a fellow musician. And he opened up this door for us to going down to Nashville. And we filmed 2 of our podcasts down there and got us into some awesome circles. And one of those individuals by the name of Byron Stradlin, and he oversees this essentially like this artistic missionary organization called ACT International, which is Artists Christian Testimonies International, which basically allows creatives to basically be Christian creatives to be like a missionary through their nonprofit. And he helps them with their, as a 501c3, helps them with their budgeting and their finances. And he is believe in his 70s. And I came into that meeting super, super discouraged from the day before. And the fact that I was even talking with him was an awesome opportunity. And I knew that the Lord was working. And he just looks at me and he gives me all this encouragement. But the thing that stuck out the most was he looked at me. I'm in my 30s. He's in his 70s. And he said, you have to do this. He said, you're going to wake up probably tomorrow and you're going to be discouraged and you're going to want to quit. And you have to do this. And I was thinking, man, that's so great. And I was like on cloud 9. I was like, whoa, let's take this on. The very next day, I had a huge hurdle and another hurdle. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I needed someone older and wiser who knew. He didn't know because of prophecy or anything like that. He knew because he's been there. He's done this. And he was preparing me. He knew that there would be a moment. He might not have known that it was going to be mere hours later, but having that from someone else and having that from someone who's been there, done that, and paid their dues, it encourages me to keep it going. And I want to give that to other people.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the verse in the Bible that says, do not grow weary. I think that verse is meant specifically for creatives. Maybe not only, but I think it's something, I know I'm not the only one, but it's something we need to remember because we could easily just be like, oh, this is too hard. Never mind, But someone else that we had on the podcast a while ago, he was saying about how his project, they created something amazing. They really did. And then it fell apart at distribution. And yeah, like, I mean, obviously these kinds of projects, films, they can fall apart at any part of the process, but this one fell apart at distribution. And so, you know, there was like this kind of letdown, but still, whenever he talks about the process of producing this movie, there's so much joy that he gets out of it. And he's like, well, I'll tell you this, making movies is better than not making movies. And he's not stopping. He's not giving up. I mean, definitely there's this setback, but like, it's not the end. Right. And that's what we need to remember, like as creatives and as Christians, that God didn't promise that every project is going to go smoothly. I don't even know if he ever promised that one would. Even Jesus, when he came, that did not go smoothly. So we can't expect that. And I'm grateful for this conversation right now, because I've kind of been asking God lately, like, so, okay, I've got all these, what's it saying, pans in the fire or whatever. Like, I got a lot going on, but everything's kind of, it's sitting there and it's just got one hurdle in order for things to go. But I kind of feel like it's like popcorn in the microwave. And so it hasn't started popping yet.
No,
it's all just sitting there, heating up, and I'm just waiting for things to go so that it can all like move and like be exciting. But I know it's gonna get there, and I'm not gonna give up. It doesn't really matter, you know, whatever comes my way, I'm gonna get through it with God and just keep moving forward. But it can get discouraging if you let it. So I appreciate this conversation, and it's been confirmation for me to remember that, this is God's plan. He is more committed to it even than I am. So you know, I just need to keep going, keep walking with him each day, do what he's called me to do for that day, and I'm good.
Absolutely. Very well said. I fully agree. And that's why we say that we exist, is, you know, it can be super discouraging. You can feel alone. There's this weird neutral or dead zone that I feel a lot of creatives find themselves. That's why we have to talk about it. That's why we have to use language, you know, calling each other artists or creatives, is because in our world with Western culture, you know, we really value education and going to college and systems, and fall into the system and you will have your career, or maybe you fall into the American dream. And when you take a step back though, and you find all the people who really change the world are those who have a creative background. You know, they thought of the world a little bit differently. Let's just use Steve Jobs with Apple. He didn't come up with the computer. Wozniak, his partner, was with the Apple II. So he was more the engineer, but I would label Steve Jobs as an artist, as a creative. He thought of the marketing and the design of what he wanted. And not only did he do the Mac, but he also with the smartphone. And he just had idea after idea and thought about how to make it practical and how to make it also beautiful. And we wouldn't agree on everything and how to approach everything, but that is just one example. Elon Musk is another who is just like, what have we not tackled yet? Like, oh, space. Let's just start investing into that. Electric cars.
Right. Let's do something that nobody's done. Let's pursue the impossible, and I think that's one of those things too, where it's like, we think that it's not possible until someone does it. And then once one person does it, all of a sudden there's a lot of people that do it because it's no longer impossible.
Yes. We would say we want Christians leading that way, just like they have historically. I mean, Renaissance art, the epitome of art and culture, right? You have to think of Michelangelo and how his faith was so intricately wired into his artistry. And he was, he worked with the church, but he had his stuff. He had his own identity and his own signature as a creative, and one of the best ever. And that's just another example of, okay, can we be a Michelangelo? Could we be a C.S. Lewis in literature? Or J.R.R. Tolkien? So we want more that are out there, and not just with a paintbrush and we can paint pretty pictures or write fun stories. That's important, and it definitely is needed, but also the ability, this is what we tell families and parents is, well, how is my child going to have a career as a writer or as a painter? And I say, well, who knows, for one, but two, thinking in a more abstract and in a creative environment is, I think, going to be so much more beneficial for your child as they're growing, more than just, say, memorization of facts and numbers. I mean, improvisation and solutions. How can I deal with a current problem? And I would say if you don't have a mind that can creatively pivot, you're probably going to drown and suffer very easily, and you're going to let those setbacks take you away from following your dreams or your accomplishments.
Yeah, actually, learning music when I was growing up taught me more than just how to play instruments. It taught me how to persevere and how to be resilient and be disciplined. Like, there's so many life skills that I learned from the process of developing that particular art.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I hope to hear more about what you guys are doing and hear more testimonies in the future.
Thank you so much, Jaclyn. This has been a pleasure. And happy to be back anytime or just to stay in touch and hear more about what you have going on. And we'd be happy to share about what we have going on.
Awesome. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you would like email reminders about newly released episodes and more, please sign up at faffpodcast.com/email. That's faffpodcast.com/email. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.
That's a wrap.